Welcome to Belonging at the Top, driving performance through people. The podcast where leadership gets real and people come first. Your hosts are Dr. Natalie Parks, psychologist, behavior analyst, best-selling author, and your go-to expert for dismantling systems of injustice while building equitable, high-performing teams. And Anthony Butler, leadership coach, thought leader, speaker, and master of helping leaders unlock their team's full potential, one breakthrough at a time. Together, they're here to tackle your toughest leadership challenges with just the right mix of science, strategy, and a sprinkle of humor. In this episode, we explore how building trust with teams can foster cultures of belonging and leaders practice consistent, predictable behavior and show a genuine investment in others.
Welcome back to another episode of Belonging at the Top. You have me, Dr. Natalie, and Anthony here today. We are hopefully going to bring you another fun episode with lots of information that you can apply to your daily life and as a leader.
Yep. And not only that, it's the beginning of season 2. So welcome to episode 1 of season 2. We are officially a year in now, a little more than a year. And so you'll notice some changes in some of the graphics, but getting some of the same, we hope some of the same good content that you become accustomed to. So today, though, we're going to focus on trust and what it is, how you build it, and why it's necessary for leaders. So we thought that it was time for us to start digging deeper into some of the skill sets that you need to kind of build that thing. So build that thing called belonging and what it means to build culture and psychological safety. So we're going to talk about a foundational concept, because I think, Natalie, you would agree that you can't be a successful leader if your stakeholders and your team has no trust in you at all.
Absolutely. And I think, as we were preparing for today and talking through some things, one of the things that we called out as really important is trust is another one of those words that we all understand from some level, but we don't often define very clearly. So the kind of trust that we are talking about is the belief that you have in the reliability or the ability or the strength of another person. And we were talking about the kind of trust that the belief is positive about that person, right? You want to be around that person more. You want to work harder for that person. Not the kind of trust of, I can trust that I will always have a bad experience when I interact with that person. That is the kind of trust you want to move away from.
Exactly.
And not towards.
Right, because we have that trust too. There are people in your lives already that whatever it is, if they were assigned to do something, you can trust and rely that they will screw it up. So we're not going to talk about trust. That might be another episode is how we deal with those people. But this episode is really focusing on those who are really on their aspirational journey to become a better leader, or they're in charge of some type of culture or team. You're leading something and you want to study the point of what makes me better in my leadership role is how do you get it to the point where people trust you? They trust that when you say something, you're going to do it. They trust your ability to perform at the level that you claim you can do, and building that trust. And why building that trust is important to building psychological safety and developing a culture of belonging in your space, wherever that space may be. So that's our focus for today.
As you were talking, one of the questions that just came up in my head is, how do you know if somebody does actually trust you in this way? I have heard some leaders who have told me, no, my team thinks I'm great. We have a great relationship, good rapport. And the way they're measuring that is because their team always does exactly what they're supposed to.
Right.
But then you talk to the team, and the team's like, no, we hate him or her. And we are just doing this because we know the punishment is so great, or we don't want to get yelled at. We don't want to have our pay but docked or anything like that. And when you look a little bit different, or a little deeper, yes, the leader's expectations are being met, but they are only being met.
And that's fear. That's not trust. That's fear. They are working to avoid negative consequences or repercussions if they do not do what they are told, right? That's not trust, that is fear. It's the absence of psychological safety, too. I think we want to point that out. There is no psychological safety. And I would say it probably leads to my answer to your question, how do you know if someone trusts you or not? You will see levels of psychological safety and how they interact with you.
I think you will also see some other just key behaviors of they seek out your assistance, not because they're scared that they'll mess up without it, but because they value it, right? So they want your opinion on things. They maybe want to run things by you, but at a much higher level than I'm checking this off to make sure that I don't get in trouble. I have this new idea. You know, people bring you new ideas, and they bring you ideas that conflicts with what you are known to say yes to, right? So they challenge you in certain ways. Those are all key behaviors that let you know your team trusts you.
You just went through the at least three different levels of psychological safety, right? You talked about learner safety. Like if they are really going to ask questions and want deeper information from you because they trust you to give them the right information, that's learner safety. Or if they are challenging something that you do, clearly that's challenger safety, but you want someone who's going to be able to do all those things. Well, you'll know as a leader if you have that type of team member, or the person who is going above and beyond to learn more about the organization, about the project, and without being prompted, asking questions about what that next thing is, and challenging your concepts, challenging your thoughts and ideas about a project in a respectful way. That person trusts you. They trust you more than one way. They trust you with not only they have a trust that says I am emotionally secure enough with this person to challenge them, and that I trust that they won't be a jerk and mean to me on purpose in response, right? I think there's two ways of looking at it. That they trust you and your ability. They also trust how you will handle the situation. And I think that's where you want to be as a leader. So that's how you will know if it exists or not. Like and it'll be evident in how your team, how your peers, how they interact with you. If they are not interacting with you, or they really are only doing what you ask and no more, no less, but only doing that to save their job, there's probably something going on there, and it may indeed lie in the lack of trust in that relationship.
I would say another way that should cue you in that people do not trust you, especially thinking about kind of the more virtual world that we live in now. People may not seek you out because you're not physically there, right? There's something very different about having a boss who's online versus a boss who is one office over or two offices over. If you find that people are always saying yes to everything that you say, chances are they do not trust you. Nobody has amazing ideas all the time. And so if you find that your team is very, very agreeable with you, that should be your signal that you probably haven't established good trust. And I would also say if they don't share their mistakes with you willingly. People who have very high levels of trust are willing to come to their boss and say, I screwed this up, or I caught this mistake. If you see that people are covering mistakes, shying away from it, trying to avoid those conversations, and maybe even worse, always trying to blame mistakes on other people. So if there's always a fall person, even if that person changes every time a mistake is made, those are also really clear signals that you are not very trusted.
Those are things you'll notice over time. You're not going to know it with someone who you just joined your team, because that trust has to be developed first. So we can talk about the process of developing trust, what the process is, and then how you go through the process, right? But I think one way you'll get that. So I expect the new employee to do what's asked of them, maybe ask clarification questions, but they're not going to challenge you most times if they've only been on the job for a few weeks up to a month. They got to learn the culture of the organization, the culture of the team, the culture of that particular building they work in. So they're still navigating that process. So we don't want you to think that the new person on the team doesn't have any strong psychological safety, which they probably don't because they just got there. That's something that needs to be developed over time.
And I would even say probably any employee that's been there for less than 6 months, depending on how quickly, there's some personal nuances. Some people develop trust quickly, some it takes longer. Some people have a very negative environment that they just came from, and so they're carrying over some of those effects, and they're just going to take longer for that, as you said, emotional safety to develop.
And some people look at trust differently. Some people, they have their opinion of trust, so their thoughts on trust are that you have trust until you break it, right? Until you do something wrong. So I know I can't completely have that faith and reliability in what you did, in you and what you say you're going to do. Versus other people, and I think I fall in this latter category, that you have no trust until you build and earn that trust. I think those are two different modes or two different approaches to trust as well. So depending on the person when they come in and what their personal trust beliefs are, I think the process is going to be the same, but how they interact will be different. If you have people who are like, nope, you start with a negative balance, you got to earn my trust, versus starting with, hey, you've got it until you do something wrong that now I know that I can't trust you. And so two different approaches individually, but the process of how you build trust with them, I think, is going to be the same. It's just going to be received differently from other folks. So if you're a negative balance trust person, every time someone says they're going to do something and they do it, they get a plus, right? If you have my trust until you mess it up, there's nothing, no harm, no foul. But as soon as you make a mistake, now you're going to be points will be deducted from your trust bank, right? But if you make a mistake with a person who already has a negative balance, guess what? They didn't trust you anyway.
Now, you might have to do two things now to get even one plus. So I think that's kind of the other thing to remember. Whether you're building trust or maintaining the trust that was already given to you up front, people are, especially at first, watching every action. They are measuring your behaviorally, what we call the say-do correspondence. You know, if you say you're going to send an email, do you send it? If you say you're going to follow up, do you do that?
Now say that again. You went into doctor mode on us. So what was the name of that?
It's say-do correspondence. So like, how well do what you say and what you actually do correspond with one another?
Gotcha. Okay.
High correspondence develops trust. Low correspondence loses trust.
It reminds me of a model we use in some of my leadership trainings. We call it simply familiarity, comfort, and trust, right? And so it's basically the say-do correspondence. We call it familiarity, comfort, and trust. In order to build trust, you can't just jump from, we went to the same high school, I know them, I'm comfortable with them, I trust them. No, it doesn't work that way. It's more of I have to have a series of moments where the say-do correspondence is high, that now I become comfortable with you. And the more that happens, the more I then become willing to share either more of my mistakes, I become willing to share my ideas, willing to challenge your ideas, and that's when you start to develop that level of trust. So you've got to, familiarity, I think I went out of order, but familiarity sounds like just what it is. You've got to have something in common. It can be something as simple as we work together. We live in the same town. We grew up together. We work in the same, went to the same high school. We have similar career choices, whatever it is, but there's something that puts you in the same room. And then as you start having more increased opportunities of say-do correspondence, the more that occurs and the more that happens over time is how that trust will develop.
I think it's important to recognize those three steps of how you're building trust.
It goes the other way as well. If your say-do correspondence is low, that your rate of doing what you say and saying what you is not going to work well. And then it'd be a different type of trust, like we talked about earlier, develops. That's I trust you not to do what you say you're going to do.
Or I trust you to blow up if you don't agree with what I just said.
When the math is not mathing.
When the math is not mathing. Or it is mathing, it's just subtraction.
That's a good point. When people say that, I really think they mean addition. When they say the math is not mathing, I think they're really saying 1 + 1. They're not saying 2 - 1.
I think it's important. Like the say-do correspondence is very important. And I always bring that up because, I mean, clearly it's something I study, but I am one of those people where if you do 100 little tiny things where you told me you were going to do something and you didn't, but you're always there for the things that maybe are really big, I don't trust you one bit. I am that person. And so I point out to people that, there are a lot of people that are like, well, I'm always there for the big stuff. But there are a lot of people that are like, if I can't trust you with the small stuff, how do you expect me to trust you with the big stuff? And I think when we think about how trust grows, that familiarity, that's where you're really just establishing the rapport. You're establishing what do we have in common. You're getting to know your team. Like, what are your goals, not just for this position or this company, but in general, right? For your career, long term, what are you doing to invest in them? Are you showing them that you're going to show up and dig in when things get rough? Are you showing them that you actually value their input and their opinion and them as a person, right? I've had so many people in the field of behavior analysis. Supervision is a really, really big thing because you have to get it to become a behavior analyst, and every behavior analyst is in some leadership position because they're always supervising someone. And one of the things that we point out is that a lot of supervisors miss out on the fact that people have aspirations, and so many leaders don't purposely build their employees up. Because sometimes they fear that if I build you up too much, you're going to leave me. Mm-hmm. And I need you. You know, we want to keep our most valuable employees, but I would argue that building your most valuable employees beyond their current position is actually what the best leaders do.
It happens again when there's a trust there as well. You're going to build those people up that you trust to do the job and that you hope have some degree of loyalty. But in the end, because that trust is there, you want them to succeed no matter where they are. And so you're going to build them up and help them move forward.
And so that familiarity, it comes with those things like small talk. It comes with those things of checking in. It comes with the things of remembering that there was an important event that just happened in their lives. That is where that first step really is. And you have to do those little things and remember those little things to move on to the next part, which is the comfort.
You know, it also reminds me, going back to one of our earlier episodes in season 1 about returning to the office, right? That is part of it wasn't said this way, but it's part of the thought process about why leaders prefer in-person work. Because that familiarity is how you then breed comfort, right? And the familiarity comes from being around somebody. And I don't think you can have that same level of familiarity on a Zoom call as we sit here and record on Squadcast today. But again, we've already had a high level of familiarity, comfort, and trust. So it's not necessary for us. This is a 20-year relationship, as opposed to the new team you just hired, who's now 2 years in or less than 2 years in. It's really hard to build that familiarity if you're not in the same room. So I think that's just kind of tying those things together, that is some part of the argument about in-person work and training sessions or team building, is that it builds that familiarity with your team. That familiarity then breeds comfort, which then fosters trust.
And I think that the other important thing when you're in that familiarity stage and even moving past that is also to think about your consistency. You know, there's a wealth of research out there that even looks at how people like choose where to go eat or those types of things, where they choose to go shop or show up, is people will choose consistency over just about everything else. They want to know that what they think they're going to get is what they're going to get, even if what they think they're going to get is mediocre. Somebody will choose a mediocre restaurant over the place where they've had the best food ever, but then was followed by something that was just... That's why a lot of people go to the restaurant and eat only, the first thing they ever ordered was phenomenal, and that is all they will eat because they fear the inconsistency, right? Exactly. Maybe it won't be as good. The same thing happens with people.
It does. I do it with church. Like, I know I can go to any Catholic church in the country, and I know exactly what Mass is going to look like. I can't say that with the Baptist church or non-denominational church. But I know for a fact that any given Sunday at any Catholic church, I already know what it's going to be like. Because why? They posted the Mass a year in advance. I know what we're talking about. I know what the readings are. I know what we're doing in Mass that day because of that consistency.
Yep. I do not know what they're going to do in a Catholic church, but I was not raised that way. So
you can look it up online right now.
Okay. Well, there you have it.
And I guarantee you can go to just about, I would say 98% of the Catholic churches around the world, and they're going to be doing exactly the same thing.
Right.
Exactly the same thing.
So keep that in mind. People do that with their own personal interactions as well. We want to know that who we think is going to show up is exactly who is going to show up. That the way I think you're going to respond to what I'm about to say or do is actually how you do. And so also understanding, I've worked with some of those leaders that are like fantastic 80% of the time. All other areas they would be passing fairly well. But the 20% of the time that they're not phenomenal, they are having big blow-ups. They come down on people real hard. They discount ideas or something like that. And maybe it's hit or miss. It's not every day that they do this, but it's enough. And I would say it only takes one really bad experience with someone for that trust to be thrown out the window. And so you also have to recognize, we've talked in season 1, we talked a little bit about being aware of how you're showing up and how you bring in other things that are happening outside in your life or in current events or those types of things. And on those days that you are not at your A plus, you need to be much more aware of how you are responding, because that consistency in your response is more important. You know, I used to aspire to be a very bubbly, very outgoing, very like motivational speaker type of person, like with all this hype and energy. And because I feel that way on the inside, but I'm not that person.
You feel that way on the inside?
I do. I'm so hype on the inside.
It's not what you project. You were not
I
Tony
know.
Robbins out here.
And so if I show up one day like Tony Robbins, people may love that version of me, but it's going to take so much energy and effort and all that stuff that I can't do that every day.
If you showed up to one of these podcasts acting like Tony Robbins, I'd be like, girl, you high today? Like, what is, you all right?
There's that inconsistency, right? So as awesome and motivational as I could be, Anthony would even think that I was high.
What's wrong with her today?
What's wrong?
What is
He would probably call somebody and check me into a psych ward.
Yeah, like, hey, Christina, what's up with her now?
So we have to also be aware of that, right? Like be aware of how you have established yourself, even if sometimes it doesn't feel like who you want to be that day. You still have to be aware of that and be that person.
The reality is, depending on how your inconsistent response is because you had something else going on or whatever it may be, it's going to damage the trust. And depending on how big the breach is, it's going to determine how long it takes for the recipient of that breach to get over whatever you said and to rebuild that trust. So when that trust is broken, you can't just say, hey, I'm sorry, I made a mistake, and move forward like nothing happened. You're going back to, depending on how bad the breach is, establishing more familiarity with the person. They need to understand, they need to see a higher degree of say-do correspondence to replace the one bad thing you did, right? And so I think that is key and critical to understand as well, both in your personal relationships and in your professional relationships, that if there is something that's damaged the trust, whether big or small, it's going to take some time to rebuild it to the level, if ever, of where you were prior to the breach. And I'm calling it a breach because then it's a breach of trust. Either it's a breach of trust because you explicitly did something that's inconsistent and you knew it, or just because you had a bad day and you crashed out on somebody and they were not expecting it and not from you, they're going to have to process that and build another level of trust with you in spite of your bad day.
Yep. Contrary to what we teach preschoolers, saying sorry doesn't actually fix it.
No, sorry
it's a good first step.
That's what I think that's key, right? Sorry without action does nothing, right? Sorry without action does nothing. We really need to work on, as a society, really, a true, sincere, genuine apology takes the work to build that trust again. It takes you putting in the time to get that high say-do correspondence again, so that person that you care about or the person that you need to trust you does indeed develop another level of trust with you.
And I think that's maybe the biggest first step, is recognizing that even if it was just a little bit, trust was broken and the intent to repair it. So we've talked a lot about kind of establishing familiarity, building some comfort. I think comfort grows every single time somebody moves a little bit, like, okay, I'm going to take a new chance. Whether I'm going to share a little bit more information with you, whether I'm going to kind of very slightly disagree with you for the first time or ask a question for the first time. When they get those consistent positive responses in return, they start taking more and more chances, right? And I think about comfort, at least in terms of how willing are you to take a chance in uncomfortable territory. Because it's easy to trust somebody when everything is perfect and you all agree on most things. It really matters when you can move the bar, like way to the positive or way to the negative, when somebody takes a chance on you, allows themselves to be a little bit vulnerable, and you respond in a way that makes it have a positive outcome. That doesn't mean you have to agree with what they say. It just means that you respond in a way. And that is where the next level comes. Now that I've taken some chances on you, I feel pretty good about taking chances on you. I am now consistently taking chances on you because I get consistently positive returns, and now I trust you.
And we do it as parents too, right? It's why we ease kids into greater responsibility in the home, right? I've
Yep.
got to yeah, you're going to start by taking out the trash, but are you going to mow the lawn next? Probably not. That's not, you got to build up to that level of skill, and then you as a parent having the trust that you won't come home with some kind of funky zigzag parent design in your lawn. And the same thing happens at work. As you start getting more and more or increased responsibility or things being delegated to you, it's not always that somebody's dumping on you. It could be that they have greater trust in you.
Yep.
And I think that's where leaders too, not specifically talking to those of us who are control freaks, that we like to have our hands in everything because we want to make sure it's done right. When we start to trust and delegate, when we start to delegate more, it means we trust the people we're delegating to.
Yes.
And I think that's something that I know a lot of leaders, especially entrepreneurs, small business owners, and in family-run businesses, it takes a lot of trust to say, all right, I don't need to be the one that does the banking run every day. I don't need to be the one who opens and closes every day. I can let someone else do that. I can let someone be more forward-facing with the customer base. I can let someone negotiate on my behalf if I'm not there. I can go on vacation. That's why most people don't go on vacations in those situations, because they don't have anybody they trust to operate the shop, whatever that business may be, while they're away. And so, but in order to get to that point, my small business owners and leaders of small teams, is that you've got to start being able to delegate to people to let them show you that they can handle the work. They probably are already showing you that you can handle the work, but we have our own things about trust and letting go sometimes that we don't exercise it. But that's a way you can do it. And if you do so, the benefits, I think, and you do it effectively, the benefits are there definitely in the workplace, right? You get better retention, you get increased performance from your team. And if you are in a small situation, when you get increased performance and you have that high level of trust, there's less you have to do. You could be out building the business and not in the business, working it every day. And I think ultimately that's what we want to do, especially if you're a small business owner. But I think those are some of the benefits as we're kind of winding up here about what why trust is important and why we need it in the workplace. And studies show it all over the place that when trust matters and you have high psychological safety on the team, and why cultures that have developed some belonging in that office space or that workspace, you do get the increased performance. Again, the high psych safety, increased loyalty and retention. It's hard to leave a team that you feel trusted on. Because again, that's that chance. Like, do I risk going to a new environment for an incremental, smaller bump in money and the feeling I have here?
I tell people all the time, I used to have a boss that used to say, like, people leave either for positive reinforcement, i.e. more money, or negative reinforcement to get away from the negative culture. I argue that people never leave for positive reinforcement because you're not looking if you're not trying to get away from something. People always leave because they don't feel they truly belong. There is something negative in that environment they are trying to get away from. And so, and the best way to undo that, you don't have to have the best benefits. You don't have to offer the most money. Like, you need to be competitive. Don't get me wrong. You can't pay somebody $5 an hour when the going rate is 50 and expect people to stay. But if all things are fairly equal and you feel like maybe you don't have the competitive edge, those companies that are paying less, that have lower benefits, but keep all of their people, it's because they have established a culture of belonging where people trust one another, they feel good about what they're doing, how they're working, their leaders are trusting them. You made that point. There is no better way to value someone on your team than to give them a project that they know is like your tight-knuckled, baby, right? When you give over a responsibility that they know you have a hard time giving over, you have established such a high level of trust. And if they trust you and like you, they're going to do everything they can to do even better than you.
Exactly. And that was going to be my comment when I was sorry for cutting you off. But yeah, that they are in that situation when I know, he'll never let this thing go. And he's let me do it. Let me rock this one out. Let me do the best I can. Because in the end, when I kind of summarize what you said about the people getting away from negative reinforcers in the workplace, I've always said that people leave people, not organizations.
Yep.
And I think that's where, if you needed one simple thing to understand why trust is important for you as a leader, it's because people leave people, not organizations. If you want to make sure that you can keep your good people there and you are competitive with your salary and your benefits, then you want to make sure they have a high level of trust, a high level of psychological safety in your workspace, and that you foster that culture for everyone. And if you do, you'll get that retention, you'll get that loyalty, and you'll also get the increased performance, which for you, it could be whatever your metrics are, you should see those consistently being met and highly met, because people are happy. Not even if they're not happy, they at least feel like they belong, and they probably are happy. They like what they do, and they're probably there. Right. So I think that's when we talk about the why as a leader. Do I need to care about what my people think? This is why. Right.
This is why.
But if you like recruiting every 18 months, then go ahead. Don't worry about.
Right. Go ahead. If you want to spend all of your profitability and increase your overhead by many percentage points, go ahead and keep recruiting and hiring, because the cost of hiring and turnover is more than face value.
It is more. So it's better to have someone there on the team who's going to do the work, who has developed some type of trust with you because of your high say-do correspondence. And you want to make sure that you model that behavior for your teams too. I think that's one thing we haven't said. We talked about how leaders build trust, but you can encourage that with your teams as well. So if you see that you have team members who are not doing what they say they're going to do, they don't have a high say-do correspondence, and you see that it will become very toxic, and people won't want to work with them on projects because so-and-so doesn't pull his weight or her weight. You want to make sure that you can nip that in the bud early as possible, that you can identify it, coach them out of that, let them know the effects and how they're disappointing their team and how it's going to really seep into their experience at the company. That's why you can still at least teach trust. I mean, you can teach it through, and you can call it performance, whatever that's. People might not like the approach of being called "Would no one trust you," but it's easy to say, "Hey, people don't like working with you because you never do what you say you're going to do."
Right.
Say it whatever fits your
however
style.
You say it.
Right, however you say it. But that's a trust coaching moment that if you see it, you should probably do. You should do earlier rather than later in someone's work experience with you, because that will help them hopefully monitor and or alter their behavior, and then it'll help you build that trust among their team members as well.
Well, and I would also say, kind of as the last final thought, and maybe this will lead into a future episode, is also recognize that coaching moment can also build or lose trust that your team has in you. Those leaders who do everything right except address performance issues in other members of the team are also not trusted leaders. So those of you that like to shy away from that, put your head in the sand, all of that, we'll give you a future episode on how to address those things. But for now, we hope that something we said sticks with you, that you can carry it forward. We love to hear your feedback and hear what resonated, and if there is things that you would like to see changed, we welcome that feedback as well. And just remember, great leadership starts with belonging.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Belonging at the Top. We hope it sparked new ideas for fostering belonging in your leadership journey. If you found it insightful, please like and subscribe to our podcast for more thought-provoking discussions. We'd also love it if you could share it with others who might benefit from the conversation. If you have any feedback or topics you'd like us to cover in future episodes, please email us or drop us a note on Instagram or LinkedIn.